4. With that said, Ms. Barclay, I think what we want to do is try to deal with items 1 through 6 quickly, and then we will get to action item, discussion item, which I believe is item number 7. So if you could start by reading item number 1.
Good morning, Meg Barclay with the CLA's office. Item 1 is a Community Redevelopment Agency report and a Chief Legislative Analyst report and resolution relative to a disposition and development agreement for the historic Angelus Funeral Home.
Other than to thank the staff, Jenna Gulliger and Esther Torres, good job. Let's get this built.
All righty then. I like that. So without objection, we'll adopt the CLA report. That brings us to item number 2.
Item number 2 is reports from the CRA and the City Administrative Officer and a resolution relative to Community Services Grant Agreement with the Port of Los Angeles High School.
I do have one question on that.
Okay, Ms. Perry has a question on item number 2. In fact, hold your question. Let's move to item number 3.
Item number 3 is reports from the CRA and the CLA relative to increasing a purchase order with Goldfarb and Lippman for legal services related to Phase 2 of the NoHo Commons mixed-use project.
Okay, no comments or objections. Then we will adopt the CLA report. That brings us to item number 4.
Item number 4 is reports from the CRA and the CLA and a resolution relative to providing funds for the construction of streetscape improvements along the Pico Boulevard corridor.
Okay, then without objection, we'll adopt the CLA report. Item 5.
Item 5 is a CRA report relative to the status of CRA investments as of September 30th, 2007.
Okay, then we will note and file the CRA report. And item 6, even though we're going to continue it, why don't you read item 6?
Item 6 is reports from the CRA and the CLA relative to amending the fiscal year 2008 budget and work program to transfer funds to fund a master plan study for the Reseda area.
Okay, then item 6 will be continued. If we could return to item number 2, and I believe Ms. Perry had some questions.
Very quick question. Based on reading of the documents, $75,000 is being allocated from the Bunker Hill program income because it's been stated that there's no other source of funds. And this is for a project or a grant to be allocated to the Port of Los Angeles High School to fund tenant improvements in a city-owned building so that this maritime-oriented high school can open. And obviously the reason I'm bringing this up is the source of the money is from the Bunker Hill Program Income Fund. This is money that previously allocated to the Business Incentive Commercial Facade and Signage Improvement Program in the Beacon Street Redevelopment Project area. And I recognize that Bunker Hill Income is a citywide fund, but previously when other council offices have used it, there's always been a payback agreement or basically reimbursement agreement. I have not had any conversation with the council person of this district as I just read my briefing notes last night, and I'm not sure if you or the redevelopment agency has had a conversation. Of course, obviously I'm going to discuss this with her in council, but what I want included in this is an agreement in place so that I can support this so that the funds will be repaid before this is approved by council.
Do you want to answer that? Oh, thank you. Good morning. My name is Walter Beaumont, Assistant Project Manager for the Harbor Region. To my knowledge, we were granted $150,000 of Bunker Hill program income in this current fiscal year for this facade program, as you mentioned, Councilwoman. And we have spent both $75,000 on a grant for a hotel and then the $75,000 for the Port Charter High School. That hotel project is now under construction. Did you want that also as part of repayment?
I think if we can repay as much as has been taken out of this particular fund, I think it should be inclusive. We've done this in the past. Actually, I did loan some money to a project in CD15 before in a very similar fashion. We did have a repayment agreement, and Ms. Hahn was fine with it. And it had terms. You may want to pull that up and perhaps use that as a template. But before I support it in council, I want a repayment agreement in place.
Well, I was unaware of any repayment agreements when these funds were granted to the region. However, if this is current practice, we'll certainly be able to do that. I don't see any issues with that. But it is a project, Beacon Street, that is coming towards the end of its life. So we've got about 4 or 5 years of tax increment flow before the project expires.
Okay, so,
Okay?
understand.
All right.
Good.
You may take your chances on that.
Make my what?
Yeah, we may have some issues with repaying you, but certainly if we have the funds, we will do that.
Well, we need a document in place, and we can work out terms so
Absolutely.
that there isn't, it's not like the lottery,
I understand.
that we'll actually get repaid.
So, Ms. Perry, or Mr. City Attorney, would it be appropriate to add some language today that would at least memorialize the commitment for repayment, or how should we proceed?
Well,
Oh,
Or, Ms. Perry, what is your fancy?
Well, my preference is to have an agreement in place before this is either approved in council. And also, should, I think, add some language in there. In the event that the Los Angeles Unified School District decides to purchase the building, it should be reflected in the language of the agreement that if someone else steps into the shoes of the city of Los Angeles, that perhaps they can assume some or part of that obligation.
I see that there's a couple things that we want to do here. We want to have some language in our contract with the school in terms of repayment, which is something that we would want to do anyways, as well as some language that reflects the agency's responsibility to the
Right.
Bunker Hill program income.
That's-
So that's more of an internal sort of arrangement, and so I don't know how we could work that out.
Well, maybe you
with
can talk
rela-
with your attorneys and,
Right.
you know, we
I mean, we could,
Okay.
we could amend the action, the recommendation, to include a recommendation along the lines of what Councilmember Perry was asking for a repayment agreement, but obviously the specific terms will have to be worked
Okay, well,
out.
let's do this.
Well, I'll make
Let's
an
just-
amending motion.
Yeah,
Would you like me
let's-
to make an
Yeah,
amending?
do that.
I would like to make an amending verbal motion that prior to approval by the city council, this item include language regarding repayment of the amount that is anywhere from 75,000 to, what is it, 120?
150, I think.
150,000, or not to exceed $150,000, be repaid back to the Bunker Hill Program Income Fund with terms to be determined. And I want that memorialized in writing prior to coming to council. And also, in addition to that, with some guidance from the city attorney, some language that reflects what could occur should the Los Angeles Unified School District decide to purchase the building from the city of Los Angeles, and whether it could assume some of the responsibility for repayment also.
Sure.
Okay, so
Can you do that?
Make an amending motion.
No. Would you be able to write that up before it goes?
don't whisper, guys. This is not polite.
Good morning, sorry. My name is Zena Huang. I'm with the City Administrative Office. And are you asking me?
Well, my question to the CAO staff, would they be the ones that be writing up this language before it goes to city council?
I would think the redevelopment agency
Or would it come from
and
the
your
CRA?
lawyers might want to put something together, and then obviously, do your due diligence as to form and substance. They have a process for doing that, and then surely the CAO may be a part of that
Okay.
process, for drafting it. Because we've done it before, and if you need examples, again, there was an example that we did in CD 15. I also did it with CD 8 on, what was Shelby Jordan's project called? It's on Vermont Seniors.
Right.
Vermont Seniors. You can take a look at that. Actually, if you need a reference, just call Bud Overham, because I'm sure he'll remember both of those situations, and then he could refer you to the deals where we actually did that and had repayment agreements in place.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Okay, then, without objection, on item 2, we'll adopt the CAO's report as amended. Okay, so that brings us to item number 7. So what we'll do here is I'll have Ms. Barclay read item 7, and then I have a few public comment cards.
Item number 7 is a report from the mayor relative to the 2008 through 2012 Housing and Community Development 5-Year Consolidated Plan and the 2008 through 2009 Program Year 34 Action Plan.
In fact, Helmy, you know what I'm going to do? We're just, and Richard, we're going to bring up, I'm going to have the do public comment right now. Margarita Asensio, please come forward. And then Susan Cohen. Good morning.
Buenos días. Mi nombre es Margarita Asensio y yo estoy muy agradecida por el Departamento de Housing Rent and Center por la colaboración que hicieron en mi familia de poder obtener a mi mascota en casa.
Which one of my colleagues want to help a brother out, okay?
I think I'm here. Buenos días. ¿Cómo se llama otra vez, señora?
Margarita Asensio.
Ms. Cynthia, she wants to say thank you to the Housing Department for the housing services provided to her family.
Just to clarify, she's here to speak on behalf of the Housing Rights Center and the services we provided to her. Francis would like to speak right now.
Okay.
I also had filled out a public comment card.
No, you were next. But so I tell you what, this is what we're going to do. If Susan will defer, I will let Francis, because the three of you are together, so Francis and Margarita and Ed, you will run this show.
Okay. So will you be speaking on behalf of these of the individuals here, or are these separate presentations?
I'll be speaking on behalf of the Housing Rights Center.
Okay.
And we've also brought clients who want to
Great.
give public
So they're
comment as well.
clients. Okay. Entonces, why don't you begin and we'll interpret.
Okay. My name is Francis.
But we're not going to let Margarita finish?
¿Vas a terminar?
She was first.
¿Quieres hablar primero? Ok, por favor.
Agradecimiento nuevamente por mi niña que estaba pasando por depresión y enfermedad y académico también, y gracias a este departamento han colaborado y ahora mi niña está subiendo de grados y estamos bien.
¿Y cuántos años tiene su niña?
11.
11. She's an 11-year-old daughter who was suffering from depression. She was ill. Her grades suffered, the lack of housing. And now that they have a home, the grades are improving, and her daughter's doing much better, and she is very appreciative of the support she has gotten in helping her family. ¿Hay más, señora?
No, todo está bien, gracias.
Okay, so it says everything is fine. She wants to just thank the housing department and housing services for their support and her family.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now, I guess, Francis, it's on you.
Okay. My name is Francis Espinoza, and I'm the Executive Director of the Housing Rights Center. And what brings me to the meeting today is the Mayor's proposed budget for 2008-09, which proposes a 40% cut to the citywide fair housing program. That 40% cut would have a severe impact on the number of clients that we serve. Our client here shared her story about having a daughter who has a disability and was facing housing discrimination, and but for the help of the Housing Rights Center, her daughter would not have been able to keep her service animal that she needed because of her disability. Last year alone, we assisted 10,575 LA City residents, and I have, if I am allowed to, excuse me?
No, I said go.
Oh, if I'm allowed to pass out, I have
Yes, you are.
some handouts for
Can
each
we,
of the
get
committee
the handouts,
members.
Mr. Clerk?
Last year, we assisted 10,575 Los Angeles City residents, and those residents come from all parts of the city. If you refer to Attachment A as part of this letter that I'm giving you, you'll see a breakdown of where all those clients come from, and they come from every council district in the city. A 40% cut in funding would severely impact the number of clients that we're able to assist. The Fair Housing Program also fits into the mayor's objectives, which are a safe, affordable home of one's choice is an essential baseline for all of his objectives, which are the youth development and education, job security and economic development, and support of affordable workforce housing. If people don't have the basic housing that we help them keep, those other objectives can't be met. Another issue that I wanted to point out is when compared to the current year's budget, the Fair Housing Program by the Housing Rights Center is actually put under the administrative and planning portion of the budget. And if you compare it to the figures last year, that part of the budget received an 11% cut. And I'm not sure why the Fair Housing Program has a proposed 40% cut. But I'm coming to you to ask you to take a look at the budget and reconsider what a 40% cut will do to the Fair Housing Program, and specifically to clients like Maria, who we may not be able to help if we receive that funding cut.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Reyes, for your assistance. Susan Cohen, Mimi Greenberg. Susan Cohen, Mimi Greenberg. Okay, then we'll go to, is it Ronald Troop? Ronald Thorpe. Bill Jones.
Good
Welcome.
morning. Thank you very much, council members. My name is Ron Troop, board president at 1736.
Hey, I got it right.
Yes. At 1736 Family Crisis Center. Just a couple of comments on the program there. It is a very successful program. We will service approximately 3,500 kids. In fact, last year we serviced 3,625 youth. It has received a grant for its core operations for each of its last 36 years from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Sources. It has a detailed follow-up service plan where we have 85% long-term success with these youth. This will be a program the city will be proud to fund, and we want to thank you very much for your support.
Thank you. Bill Jones? I have three people. Were they, Mr. Sergeant, were they abducted by aliens, or? With that said, I'm going to ask the departments to come forward. Helmy, Richard. Hold 1 second. Mr. Jones? Mr. Jones, please come forward. We were looking for you. You guys stay. Helmy, we don't have to play musical chairs. Unless you want to just get the exercise. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
You're up.
All right, I'm here for the Housing Rights Center. And I used them a couple of years ago, and they were extremely helpful to me. I've written out a little,
Go right
if you don't
ahead.
mind. Anyway, I'm William Jones, and I'm the payee. I received the Social Security benefits for Philip Walters. He's a mentally challenged man, and he's in his 50s right now. I've been doing this for over 20 years, so it started out when he was 30. And he's lived in the same apartment building in Hollywood for the last 20 years. But that building has changed owners a number of times. The last owner wanted Philip out because they said he was a nuisance. He's brain damaged. He's not very coherent, but he's able to take care of himself. I felt they wanted him out because they just wanted to raise the rent. It's a single room is what it is. It's not worth much, but in Hollywood you can get twice as much as he's paying. So I contacted Ms. Uhatsu at the Housing Rights Center for help, and she started working on the case right away because time was very important. He was going to be evicted. And if she hadn't, Philip would have been on the streets at that time. Ms. Uhatsu wrote the realty company and explained the federal and state housing laws to them very clearly. She also did an on-site survey. She went out there and interviewed the residents of the building. None complained about Philip creating any kind of a nuisance. She sent the real estate company a 4-page letter explaining what she had learned from the other tenants and their complaints also. They had a bunch of complaints that were not being taken care of by the management. And after months of negotiation, an agreement was reached between the landlord's attorney, and the Housing Rights Center, and Philip was able to remain in his apartment. I mean, she was very successful in the route she took. I have, if you're interested, I have the letter that she wrote and the report. It's quite lengthy, but you're welcome to it.
Please. Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. We're now joined by our colleague, Mr. Tony Cardenas. With that said, Helmy, are you going to start this thing?
Yes.
Wait, did we find Miss Greenberg? Please come forward.
Thanks very much.
Morning.
Good morning. I'm Mimi Greenberg. Do you ask me questions, or I just tell you?
This is
Okay.
your 2 minutes.
A few years ago, the Housing Rights Center was extremely helpful to me. I have chronic progressive multiple sclerosis, and the condominium where I live, I was assigned a parking space that was not handicap accessible for the van that I have that has a lift. And the homeowners association refused to assign me a space that was accessible because it was deeded to other people. And I went to a number of different attorneys and community services, and either they didn't know how to handle the case or they had no interest in the case. The Housing Rights Center took the case, and after many meetings with the homeowners association and that turned me down, they spent 2 years negotiating on my behalf, and they did, in fact, get me a handicap accessible space. So I am very grateful to them.
Well, thank you for adjusting your calendar and coming and chatting with us this morning.
It's a pleasure for them.
It's a pleasure for us to meet you. Okay, let me make one more request for Susan Cohen. Going, gone. Now, Helmy, quick.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and HCED committee members. I'm Helmy Hisrick, Deputy Mayor of Housing and Economic Development Policy. And in presenting to you the Mayor's proposed 2008 to 2012 Housing and Community Development Consolidated Plan and related 2008-2009 Program Year 34 Action Plan. I'm joined this morning by Rhonda Gaston, who is the Director of Budget and Operations for the Mayor's Office of Housing and Economic Development, and Richard Bembo of the Community Development Department, General Manager. I believe also Anna Mae Uton of the City Administrative Office is here as well. We also have today the Community Redevelopment Agency, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, and Los Angeles Housing Department here to answer any questions. I'll provide you with an overview of the process that we undertook for Program Year 34 budget, policy issues we strive to address within the budget, and then after that we'll allow Rhonda Gaston and others to provide the necessary detail. As you're aware, the consolidated plan is comprised of 5 federal housing and community development entitlement awards, including Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment Program, American Dream Down Payment, Housing for Persons Living with AIDS, and Emergency Shelter Block Grant. The total of these awards this year, including program income and carry-in savings from prior years, is $153 million. Of that $153 million, $90 million is in Community Development Block Grant. The revenue this year is significantly less than the $114 million we've had in this current year. It's down approximately $24 million in Community Development Block Grant alone. The decline in the program income administered by the Los Angeles Housing Department and is attributed by LAHD to the changing national economy, down from $25 million this year to actually $25 million was estimated this year, and $13 million is their current projection, and that is their forecast for next year as well. There's also a 3% decrease in the entitlement based on recent legislation approved by the President, $74 million down to $72 million. So our total reduction in the con plan budget is approximately $30 million. The Mayor's Office began conversations with City Council last September. Concurrently, under the direction of the Mayor's Office, CDD convened community meetings to solicit input on the types of programs and projects that would best meet the needs of city residents. Considering this feedback, the Mayor formally announced opening of the CDBG application process on October 1st and received over 200 applications totaling in excess of $283 million. This year, a new approach was taken. We call it a bilateral approach. CDD and CAO reviewed the con plan concurrently and made recommendations to the Mayor's Office. Applications were assessed by CDD staff to determine project compliance with CDBG and eligible national objective requirements, as well as project readiness. The CAO reviewed CDD's recommendations as well as non-recommended eligible activities to further determine project readiness, leveraging opportunities, other funding opportunities, other sources of revenue. CAO also considered impacts on the city programs, the general fund, and related to potential CDBG funding reductions. Within the proposed budget, we've proposed elimination of some duplication of effort, such as the abandoned bulky item pickup. And in keeping with the direction set forth by the Mayor last October, the proposed budget suggests several projects for integration into larger systems with funding to be awarded based on merit, consistent with city procurement policies. Additionally, funding is proposed based on focus of applications on city priorities and the ability to demonstrate measurable outcomes. Additionally, funding is proposed based on focus of applications on city priority. Oh, I just said this. Consequence: there are a minor number of new programs proposed within CDBG budget, which reflect city priorities of workforce training, youth development, and affordable housing. Because of the limited funding, there is a substantial decrease in the allocation for economic development activity. As a proportion of CDBG dollars, the allocation for economic development, the primary legislative intent of CDBG, is $4.3 million, or 4.5% of the overall budget. To ensure parity with other allocations such as housing, which, despite a decrease in dollars, remains stable at 23% of the overall CDBG allocation. It is also proposed that the city departments and community-based organizations identify and utilize existing and alternative sources of funding more creatively and efficiently. To continue project funding at current levels, we must increase our grant-seeking efforts and more efficiently manage our limited resources. Thus, it is additionally proposed that a working group of key city staff be convened over the next weeks to continue the work started by the CAO under this application process to better match projects and resources. Most important, it is critical that the city does not decrease funding to LASA. We have seen this agency turn itself around under the new leadership of Rebecca Isaacs, and to decrease funding for this agency would make it very vulnerable and unstable, as county monies are generally contingent upon city contribution. So although federal funding formula suggests that public service expenditures be decreased for program year 34, it is proposed that LASA be fully funded. To ensure this, the Mayor asked the CRA, the agency has agreed to fund up to $4 million of homeless-related services in partnership with LASA for this program year, while we would determine a source more stable and steady than CDBG to finance these vital services. Now I'll turn it over to Rhonda, CDD, and CAO to discuss the plan in more detail, but thank you for your time and your partnership with the Mayor in managing federal grant resources to ensure the needs of low and moderate income residents of the City of Los Angeles.
Thank you.
And I'll let Richard go. I'll defer to Richard first.
Okay. Just a couple of comments to Helmi's very thorough presentation. You'll recall that we had an issue last year regarding the CBDOs, and we were instructed to resolve that and not bring that forward this year to be resolved during our process here. And I'm happy to report that we were able to certify CBDOs in front of the process, so we don't have that issue to deal with. The other thing I would like to mention is the fact that every 5 years, along with your con plan, you have to submit a 5-year plan. And so along with our submission this year, we are bringing forward our 5-year plan as well. So that will be also included in the submission this year.
So now, just real quick, and then we'll go, right? The CBDO issue, all of the agencies that are going to be recommended this time
Or certified.
are already.
That's right.
So we won't be doing it based on the
That's
fact
right.
that.
That's right.
Okay. Good work.
Rhonda Gaston with the Mayor's Office of Housing and Economic Development. Actually, I'll go through the actual budget and highlight for you changes from the current year in terms of what's proposed for the next year by budget category. But if I may, I wanted to address the public comment related to the fair housing line item within the admin category first, given the public comment. It is not that the mayor is proposing to cut those services by 40%.
Look at us, you're looking at the clerk. He gets nervous when you look at him. We like it when you look at us, so go on.
It is not that the mayor is proposing to cut that particular line item by 40%. We are asking that LAHD work with the mayor's office to prorate the cost of those services across all of the entitlements, which is allowed by HUD. Historically, CDBG has funded the full cost, but it is a requirement of HUD that we only demonstrate compliance with fair housing activity. It does not have to be funded solely by CDBG. So we're asking that CDBG pick up its fair share, but all of the other entitlements fund that category as well. So we're not suggesting that the $500,000 be cut by 40%, but that some of the costs be shifted to the other entitlements. But going back to give you an idea of how we derived at the budget, as Helmi mentioned to you, we had a significant decrease in program income this year in addition to a decrease in the entitlement award. And I'm speaking to CDBG. LAHD separately administers all of the housing entitlements and can address those separately. Our total revenue this year is about $90 million, which, as Helmi mentioned, is about a $24 million decrease from the current year. Because of that decrease and the federal funding formulas for both public services and admin and planning categories, which are capped, we were also required to cut within those categories $1.7 million for public services and $2.5 million within planning and admin. So we strive to actually balance those particular categories first, and then we looked at all of the new applications that came in to see what we could fund thereafter. For public services, again, we had to cut $1.7 million. We're down from $16.4 million in that category to about $14.7 million. If we work in accordance with the required 15% cap, the mayor's proposed budget does meet that particular threshold. We actually got to that percentage by asking CRA to pick up some of the LASA costs so that those could remain fully funded but outside of the consolidated plan process. Additionally, we suggested graduated cuts within particular line items. As Helmi mentioned, we consolidated all of the human services line items into the overall human service delivery system and proposed, I believe it's a 10% cut to that particular line item overall, but the mayor's office will leave it to CDD to determine which they're in within that category, which projects actually should be cut and which ones should not. Certainly, there are projects that are already at a minimal funding level, such as Plaza de la Raza and others that only receive $50,000. Giving them an additional cut may render those particular projects not useful or not viable, so possibly those organizations would not receive a cut and other agencies would receive a larger cut so that we realize the overall 10% cut to that line item. In the CBDO category, we additionally did the consolidation to, again, bring together, integrate all of the related human services projects so that we can actually better evaluate and analyze projects that are providing similar services. LASA, again, remains fully funded in that particular category. Although the budget demonstrates a 3% cut there, that is because the money was allocated and unused in the prior year. And LASA has advised that contracts will be fully funded without that additional $190,000, so we pulled that out to plug in holes elsewhere. We actually consolidated the neighborhood improvement and public facilities line item simply because we didn't have enough money to go around to fund various new line items within both categories. Overall, The mayor has proposed $7 million in new programs, some of which are in those particular combined categories, based upon the priorities that were articulated by the mayor and the council. Going back to Helmi's comments again, in economic development, there are no new line items. We actually had to defund the Big If pot, which is usually the money we set aside for large strategic projects. There just was not enough money to go around and to fund those particular types of things this year. We did maintain funding for ongoing services which are considered obligatory in that they are institutionalized in the city systems right now. Those are funded at lesser costs. For the housing and related program category, again, as an overall proportion of CDBG allocation of $90 million, 23% of that money is for housing and related activity, although there is a decrease overall to LAHD of about 20% when you factor in the decrease that we are proposing for their planning and admin category as well. The mayor's budget strived not to decrease direct federal services, so the decrease in housing that you see is related, the net decrease is about $4 million in services, and that is related to the actual elimination of the Section 108 debt service payment that the city has historically paid. We are suggesting that the department come back with a report to both the mayor and the council to see how we can, to actually demonstrate what is actually due to HUD in terms of the Section 108 debt, and also to let us know how much we can actually get back from the borrowers before we determine that we need to budget $5 million annually for that purpose. Otherwise, we'd have to take money out of direct services to fund that line item. Overall, housing activity is about $76 million of the overall $153 million in comp plan resources. That equates to about 50% of all money that goes out under the comp plan. We did propose a significant reduction to LAHD in terms of their planning and admin category. Currently, they receive $3.7 million, and we're suggesting $2.2 million. The department has been directed to work with the CAO to determine how they can absorb that, either through their current vacancy rate or whatever other, I guess, better maximizing or leveraging their other resources to pick up some of the costs that CDBG has funded in the past. And the cut was taken there primarily because, again, we were required by federal funding formula to reduce that category by $2.5 million. Within that category, there are several smaller allocations to smaller departments such as aging. The controller may get $80,000 for accountant who does work related to CDBG. Actually proposing an across all line item budget cut may render some of those things not viable. Again, we may not be able to fully fund the related costs for the general fund if we were to cut the amount that goes to the controller and otherwise. So we look to balance the budget, unfortunately, in the LAHD line item because that's where we had the most flexibility.
Well, this is a very depressing report.
It is.
Continue. You got the short straw. I would have made Helmy do it.
But there is some good. We were able to fund, again, $7 million in new services this year, again, according to priorities that were articulated by the mayor and the council. It includes primarily public facilities dollars as well as some neighborhood improvement funding. We also included some workforce line items within the public services category that are ongoing services and very critical to the city's workforce strategy that could not be funded by WIA funding because of budget shortfalls on that end. So we balanced the budget. We looked at both WIA and CDBG to find out which was the best funding source for those particular activities. One of the things that the mayor's budget actually did look to do this year was to decrease the reliance on the general fund for subsidy of related cost. We had been advised by the CAO and others that historically the amount of money that we allocate to particular programs in the comp plan didn't fully fund the programs, and the city budget was having to subsidize. So to the extent that we could fully fund programs that are allocated dollars in the comp plan, we did so. Although because we are capped at the amount that we can fund out of CDBG, All related costs are not recovered, but that was a policy decision that was made by the mayor to try to strive to make sure that we weren't overburdening the general fund as a result of making comp plan decisions. Last, but very important, the information related to the decline in the program income, the mayor's office was made aware very late in the game in that regard. So we think it's very critical that we work with the operating departments to determine how we can possibly change the way we project the revenue so that we can try to, at some point, get back to the level of program income that we've had in the past. We don't know how we'll do that, but we'll be working with the operating departments. We also want to look at other ways that we can operate and do grant making within the city. It may mean that we will have to, because of declining revenues, institute a cash match requirement for agencies that receive CDBG dollars. It may mean that we have to institute a cycle where we look at how long it will take agencies to become self-sustaining and no longer need CDBG. We want to take all of those things under consideration, and the mayor's office will be reporting back with mechanisms that we determine to make those things a reality.
Okay, well then I'll ask, just say your name.
Okay, Anime Utem from the CAO. I believe everything that the CAO had done with regards to this comp plan was covered by Helmi and Rhonda already.
Okay. Helmi, I think it was you that talked about aggressively going after grants to try to make up some of the difference. Was that in your presentation?
Yes, it was.
Do we have we targeted some grants already? Do we have a projection as to what would be available and what we might qualify? Have we gotten to that point?
We have not gotten to that stage.
Okay.
We've identified, we're looking at state opportunities as well as foundation opportunities, but we have not targeted a specific amount.
Okay, and I'd like to ask Mercedes to come up for one quick question, and maybe Richard, you could be a gentleman.
And get up. Yes,
And I know you're a gentleman, see, so I know you were going to do that anyway. So,
good morning,
Mercedes. How are you going to deal with all of these challenges?
Well, this is obviously a very bad year. There are complicated regulations and lots of ordinances that govern how it is that money can be allocated. The department is funded almost exclusively through fees on the rent and code side and through this federal funding on the major project side. The challenge that we face as a department, one is that LHD is always in budget because the fees and programs are approved through the city's regular general fund budget, although it's not general fund money, and through the consolidated plan on this side. There are legal restraints on our ability to transfer money or use money in code or rent. They can only be used for those services. Mm-hmm. So as it relates to the admin cut, that is the particular difficulty because we already, we believe, are at the maximum level of use of the gas percentages. The use of rent and code dollars has to pass muster on an audit. And, perhaps we can move another percentage, but not the kind of dollars that make up for a 40% admin cut. That's just, the reality of what we face. It is also true that the home entitlement is also being cut. So while we're taking a large CDBG cut, we're also taking a large home cut, which means that the admin money at home is also severely limited. So the ability, for instance, to make up the difference for the Fair Housing Center is almost non-existent because the only money that we could use would be home dollars. But because we're taking such a large CDBG cut, we have to make that all work. So that very, very difficult. I guess in the end, what I would have to be, I've always been forthright with everyone. And so I wouldn't, if I were any different, you would know that I wasn't being truthful with you. So that's just not my way. I think the word that we are going to have to look at is layoffs. There are 43 full-time employees that are covered through this CDBG funding. When you take a look at consolidating, that's 19 positions that would actually have to be cut. It is not my place to determine in this process what ultimately should or should not happen. That really lies in the hands of the policymakers, the mayor, and the city council. So I think the best that I can do, both being forthright with you, but telling you how very difficult it is to have this balanced, it's a 40% cut to us and a 10% cut or less to others. So very difficult. I guess we will have to rely on the good thinking and objective analysis of the CLA and the CAO to come back to help us all balance this out. It's not my place in this forum to advocate. It's my place to answer your question. And, we'll see. But that's, I think, the best I can do. It's a very bad situation. It would be hypocritical of me to say, oh, we can make that work. We can't. So it's tough. It's a tough time.
Well, as this process continues and you work with the CAO, CLA, and the mayor's office, and you pare things down, I want to make sure that you stay in contact with us. And I'd like to know, what is the limit? How far can you go before you get to the point of layoffs? And then once you get to that point, I want to see what's the gap remaining, and then let's hope that creatively we can come up with a way to move forward and try to maximize the services we provide. And this is not a time that I want somebody to get a pink slip.
We will, of course, be happy to do that. We're looking at it. And, I guess I would say this is a very bad year for the city. So we expect a cut, right? So I don't want to leave with the impression of any kind of a strident discussion. We understand exactly how bad it is. And because we are the ones that track the market, we are more aware of others of how bad it is. But nonetheless, we will be happy to provide the information to everyone. It should be a transparent process so that everyone can see exactly what it is, and with the help of those whose job it is to do objective analysis to help us assess that.
Okay, Ms. Perry, I think.
I just want to
and then Mr. Reyes, and then Mr. Cardenas. Ms. Perry?
We won't be voting today on this, so I need a report back from the CLA and the CAO on a number of items. As previously indicated, the redevelopment agency has been asked to provide $4 million in funds for homeless-related programs. I would like to know if there is any analysis that some of the projects proposed in the con plan may not meet the funding requirements for the redevelopment agency. Also, what source of funds from CRA are being proposed for this purpose, the $4 million? I need to know the account and basically which fund are we talking about. And if the redevelopment agency does not approve the funding, what alternative funding sources exist? So I need to report back on that. So given that we have this cut, we're dealing with a very dire situation, I'm asking the CLA and the CAO to report back on any other options we could fund additional projects, and a report on the distribution of CDBG funds per council district. Now, clearly, there's some self-interest here. I'm obviously disappointed because I represent a council district that probably, at least equivalent to Mr. Reyes, would have the most qualifying census tracts and did not get one single new project funded. In reviewing this, I noticed there was not a line item for block grant investment funds. Can CLA and CAO report back on the status of BIGIF? And again, also report back on the previous point I made. There's been an enormous amount of emphasis placed on program income receipts, as stated in the mayor's letter and communicating this to the committee, that program income receipts are a declining revenue source. CDBG program income is primarily derived from the repayment of CDBG affordable housing loans administered by the Housing Department. Now, we all talk about the downturn in the housing and real estate market, and I can specifically talk about downtown because I think some people are in a state of denial about where the real estate market is, but I can tell you as one who's already received copies of people's short sale notices and foreclosure notices and people with no negative amortization loans, not only downtown, but the southern part of the city. We're in a downturn real estate market. Obviously, this is expected, and obviously it will affect our budget. So can I ask the CLA and CAO to report back on program income receipts decline and the correlation with the downturn in the real estate market and the status of our loan portfolios for the housing department and the CRA? And if you can, please break that down by council district. So we've got LAHD's administrative funding reduced by 41%, down to about 2.2 million. Last point I want to make, CLA and CAO, tell us how deficient this level of funding will be for LAHD to operate the programs that currently exist successfully. This should also include an analysis of staffing needed and an analysis of the minimal amount of admin funds that LAHD needs to continue to operate. And those are the questions I have for the report back, and that's it.
Mr. Reyes.
Councilman Perry covered a lot of ground that raised a lot of the issues that I had in terms of impacts by this 40% cut. But I do have other instructions for the CLA, and I might as well throw them into the mix here. One is to reallocate the pay CD1 line items to the return of the Clean Streets, Clean Neighborhoods program. Please check for eligibility and report back. Request that CLA and CA report back on identifying $200,000 for the creation of the River Ranges program, which will serve as a cleanup and youth employment program for the LA River. Reallocate $25,000 from the Cypress Park Youth and Family Center line item for purposes of funding the restoration of the playground at Leo Paletti Elementary School. LAUSD will provide a match. Please check on eligibility and report back on that request. Also request CLA and CO to report back on the feasibility of restoring the full 15% of all the human delivery services program. So that would be the 4 items that get a report back as we go through this process. Thank you.
Mr. Cardenas.
I'd like CRA to report back and explain how the homeless services gap should be filled by the CRA department. Is that the appropriate department? And if so, explain why CRA is going to be shouldering that. Yeah, it's 4.5, I think. 4.3. 4.3 million. Also, Mercedes, can you describe to us if you were to have to follow through at the end of this process and realize that up to 19 positions will be reduced in your department, can you give us some examples of some of the services that would be, not that you wouldn't be able to provide it, but that would be impacted?
Certainly. This would hit all the gas positions. So we would go anywhere from those that work that run the trust fund, the entire policy staff would be severely affected. So all the people that do all of the thinking on the new things that we come forward with, that's who that hits. Systems, all of the accountants. Now, you know, we have a very complicated accounting system at LHD, many, many accounts. We've had to add to it because in the last 4 years, the trust fund and our other programs have actually quadrupled in volume. So we have to maintain all of that. So it's accounting, it's portfolio management, again, it's systems, it's the budget and grants unit, it's the executive office, pretty much all of the things that are the mortar that bring the whole department together, that is what is specifically targeted, because the other dollars, rent and code, support those entire programs, right? So it's all of the support that keeps the department running, as well as major projects, home ownership, rehab, that's what gets hit.
And these are not fee-based funded, right? Not like
No.
the other aspects of what
That's
the
right.
housing department does.
Correct.
So therefore, you would be depending on the kinds of funds in the con plan which have gone toward this in the past.
This is the only money that pays for that. For instance, the mayor and the city council have historically contributed general fund dollars, but only to the trust fund and the programs. We use only a very small percentage for admin. So until we have permanent sources of funding for housing in general, we are completely dependent on this source. Our entire housing program in the city is based on this funding.
But basically, this reduction is actually exposing a fundamental flaw that we have, and that other levels of government would like to see us handle certain responsibilities at the local level for our constituents, but they don't fund the administration of those activities, correct?
That is correct.
So in other words, they may want us to have dollars to infuse into housing for end users, et cetera, but in order to administrate, they don't send us funds for that.
No.
And
We're allowed to use a certain percentage, as Rhonda could speak more ably to.
yeah, we're allowed to use a certain percentage, or we just go ahead and decide that as a city of Los Angeles, we will go ahead and tap the general fund for those purposes, because the general fund is not restricted.
Correct. But that is not true at LAHD. We don't use general fund.
I know we don't, but the thing is, it's a policy decision within this city that we haven't dedicated the amount of general fund necessary to administrate the kinds of activities you just described.
That is absolutely correct.
Okay. All right. I have a question about the process in the San Fernando, thank you, Mercedes. In the San Fernando Valley, we don't have any valley-based CBDOs, but there is a process, request for proposals, and also an RFQ process that was supposed to get underway this month. Can somebody give me a status on that? Because we're going to need some CBDOs in the valley by April, correct?
That's correct, Councilman. We do have RFPs out for 3 that we're in the process of selecting now. So hopefully that process will be completed by the time this fiscal year program activity starts, and there will be no gaps in service. We'll be ready to go.
So, and at this time, you anticipate that that process will be complete by April?
Yes. I think my staff is telling me yes. No? Not by April.
Yes, no.
Well, come forward and speak into the microphone, somebody.
Sure.
Yeah, no, trust me. No, trust
I got up on that.
Trust me, we're going to wrap this up.
Good morning, Sharon Morris, CDD. We hope that just after April, because it does take a while, for the RFP to be on the street, folks to respond, and then we have to allow time for an appeals process and so forth.
What does after April mean? May?
We're hoping the contracts will be executed by May, yes. So there will be a short gap in services, and there's really not a way for us to get around that. What we would like to propose is that among the report backs to this committee will be language that will allow us to contract with the proposed agencies without having to come back through the entire
like
council.
on a 30-day basis?
Pardon me?
Like on a 30-day basis contract, or what?
Well, we won't be able to do a 30-day contract with the existing Valley agencies because they are not CBDOs and we don't have a source of funding to give them. That's what we would normally do. If they were CDBG eligible, or if we had an alternative stream of money, we would do a month-to-month contract with them to avoid the gap in services.
But you're talking about potentially doing a month-to-month contract with the future anticipated?
No. We wouldn't want to do that to them because they have to get up and running. What we're suggesting is rather than coming back through the normal council process to approve the recommended agencies, that we be allowed to make that recommendation, that we have language allowing the general manager to go ahead and contract with the winning agencies.
Oh, that would be interesting. I'm sure we'd like to see any of that language. We would
bring that language back.
I'm not saying I like the idea, but we need to have a fix because we can't have a gap.
So, but I'm a little bit confused. If I could just ask one thing, and like Ms. Perry has just ordered, we will make council today. Who do you want to temporarily contract with? I thought you said that you didn't want to contract with the people that are applying or who are going to be competing in this RFP process. And then I thought I heard you say that you would, so maybe I just...
Yeah, let me explain it. What we would seek is pre-authorization to enter into contracts with the winners of the process as soon as it's completed, rather than completing the process, then coming all the way back through for approval. That's going to account for the gap in service, coming back through to committee and council for approval. What we're asking is that you grant us approval to award those contracts immediately after the conclusion of the solicitation and selection process, so that we don't have to lose time coming back through for approval. That's one way to either eliminate or reduce the amount of time that there would be a gap in service.
Yeah, but to come back to the council for approval, what amount of time do you think we're going to be eating up here?
It usually takes about 30 to 60 days to get through the approval process.
But there's no legal requirement that says that we have to take that long.
No.
I mean, you could put something to council, we could calendar it, notice it, put it through the committee process, put it through the council process within 10 days.
It has happened that fast, and in other cases it doesn't. We don't control that, so we don't.
I think your first ask of the council should be, because we don't want a gap in services and we would like to avoid that, then what you ought to be asking the council is, can we work with your department to make sure that as soon as you have the information that you need to forward to us, that you expedite it to us, that we expedite it through the process, and then the chairman and the president of the council will do what they can to make sure that it gets in and out as quickly as possible.
Sure.
No, and I agree. But let us stay on top of this. So if something does go a little sideways, the council could maybe take action to give you authority to do something temporarily. But I agree with Mr. Cardenas. This would be a priority of this committee. It would not languish, in limbo somewhere. We would act and act quickly. Mr. Cardenas.
Also, then I'd request a report back from CDD on your anticipated timeline as the process is occurring right now.
Okay.
Okay. And one more question. I was noticing in the document that it refers to the San Fernando Valley, the Valley Plaza Retail and Shopping Center, that it's critical to the citywide economic development strategy. I'd like a report back on what the anticipated sources of funds, if any, that would be put into that project. Because I'm right down the road from that one, and there might be some census tracts out there that might need service, but nowhere near the number of census tracts that are in the CD6 and CD7 down the road. So I'm real skeptical about what sources of funds are going to be gravitated toward that project. Great project. Again, limited funds.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Then, without objection, we'll hold this item in committee and ask the CAO and CLA to report back jointly with the recommendations suggested by this committee. That brings us to, that's the last item, so that brings us to have one public comment card. Chuck Tennant, please come forward. Quickly, Chuck.
You want to make quorum?
Chuck Tennant. You know what I just heard? It sounds like the LA Housing Department is facing massive budget cuts that will hurt and be devastating in the administrative forces there in their efforts in continuing housing projects, which are essential to help people in the city. Don't take away their tools. Help them get the money somewhere, like Herb Wesson did on some housing issues in the past. And Herb's a role model in helping the housing department and people in need of housing. And the city housing department's role is to help people to get into housing and to get into affordable home ownership. I hear strong rumors of these budget cuts that will hurt the city housing department and their programs and their hardworking efforts in helping people. And this department is vitally important to housing issues. Don't take away their tools so they can do their job. I'm here for another reason also, one of their programs on rehab. Herb helped in the past. I need help and others do. The budget again is holding up an issue on rehab. And they want me to be happy, they want me, and I'm the responsible party in the end to pay it back. And I'm a role model, and I'm trying to help other people. And all the parties are excited to get the program started and finish it. And I'm living testimony that it can be done. And I started in the beginning with Herb's help and helping the city housing department and helping others getting into housing. But sometimes you need things fixed up so you can be comfortable and be proud of what you're living in. And I'm living testimony that it can be done. And I want to help others, like Herb helped me, and he helped others. And I want to speak to Andrew after, but it has to do with rehab. It always seems to be about budgets. But you know what? Again, it's one of the programs of many in there. Yeah, we're going through a lot of things, but don't take away their tools. Give them the opportunity to continue the things. There's money around that can be used and put in there. Please do it.
Thank you.
I had one last thing, but I know...
You can tell Andrew afterwards.
Okay.
Our last, and this is the last public comment, I think it's Ivan Guzman or Yvonne. Okay, Yvonne.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning. First of all, I want to thank you for allowing me to address you. I'm sorry that we were late. This is my first time here. My name is Yvonne Guzman. I'm with Reach for the Top. We're a transitional housing facility in the West Adams District. We're on Adams and La Brea. We provide housing for anywhere from 25 to 30 homeless people on any given. Here's a picture you've probably seen.
I probably see it every day.
You probably see it every day, and it's the reason that I'm here is because we were not recommended to be funded, and I'd like to have it reconsidered because we are providing the services. We don't have any funding at all, and we've been successful in providing services for these people, and so that's one thing. We'd like to acquire the building that we are currently using to continue to secure the housing for this population. And the other thing is we also submitted another application to develop a 3-unit low to moderate income building with a mixed-use building on Adams between La Brea and Crenshaw. So it's twofold. The urgency, it really is more with this because we already have the people there. And we participate with the Weingart Housing Program through the pilot program, and that's how we basically have been meeting our financial needs. But by the same token, because we have the lease payment every month, it's high, I mean, it's not high really, but because that's where all our money goes, so we don't really have any money left over for services, and also to, for operating costs, et cetera. I have not been able to get to any of the city agencies to help us. I've been knocking on doors for 2 years, and they have not been opened. So this is basically, and so we did write the applications in for community development block grant funds, and I'm basically appealing to you to take consideration on a request.
We will look into it. Thank you for coming. So, Ms. Barclay, there's no further business before this committee?
No, sir.
Then this committee's adjourned.